going to get started, and today we're going to do our class. The title of our class is Whose Mold Is It Anyway? Okay, so or the gist of what we're going to talk about basically is mold, the M word. We don't like to use the M word. I prefer mildew or discoloration, because as soon as you hear the word mold, what happens? Everybody freaks out, and it's the end of the world. So we're going to start with, I'm going to start with basically like a little story, more or less. I've got some photos of some mold. These photos are a little bit grainy. I think this is the corner. Someone pulled back some drywall, and you've got some, black discoloration, and this, I think, is the carpet area that's been pulled back. But let me give you the gist of how we need to handle these type of issues. It appears as though the concern I had about mold issues probably 4 or 5 years ago is, maybe I was overreacting a little bit, but I was really concerned that mold was going to kind of go the same direction as lead-based paint and asbestos. Okay, lead-based paint, serious issues, lots of litigation. Asbestos, serious issues, lots of litigation. The issues with mold in properties, not that they're not serious, and I'm going to probably make a lot of light-handed, comments and make some jokes about a few things here and there, not to minimize how serious this is and how important this is and what sort of liability it can be, not to mention deal killers, because people hear the word mold and they freak out. Okay, so this is, by the way, before I get into these pictures, I've got a couple of disclosures that we pulled up in the MLS. We actually went through this in our disclosure class just a couple days ago. This is the transfer disclosure statement, and it wasn't that long ago on the transfer disclosure statement. And page 2. Page 2. Okay, it wasn't that long ago. I'm on page 2 of the TDS, section C1, where the word mold wasn't there. I don't remember how long. I guess I'm showing my age here a little bit, but I think it was about maybe 2005, maybe 2006. It might have been a little earlier, but prior to whatever date we're looking for, mold wasn't on the form at all. Okay, so this is the challenge with mold. Now I'll tell you a brief story, and maybe some of you guys can sympathize or have similar stories. I was selling a house. I was a listing agent. This was probably 10, 11 years ago. It's up in Sunapee Ranch. House had been vacant for an extended period of time. It was not a foreclosure. It was a Mr. and Mrs. homeowner had lived there, and the property basically had been vacant, and we had the property in escrow. Okay. The buyer's agent, and there's a whole bunch of pieces. By the way, this class is going to take about an hour, maybe a little bit, an hour and 15 minutes at the most. But this particular story can encompass the entire process and, frankly, the entire problem in dealing with mold problems. Okay, so in this particular case, I'm the listing agent. I have an offer that comes in. Buyers have the standard residential purchase agreement, 17 days inspections. Okay, they get out, they do their physical inspection. In the garage of this property, there is, no joke, about the size of a thumbprint, maybe a 1-inch square area on the drywall on the garage, a couple of feet away from the man door to go in the house, and probably a couple feet away from the hot water heater and the forced air unit, which both were in the garage. Anyway, there was an area of discoloration, mildew, mold, whatever you want to call it, about the size of a thumbprint. Okay? So, with that information, the buyer's agent orders a quote-unquote mold inspection. Okay? Now, right off the bat, does the buyer's agent have the authority to order an inspection on a property without the listing agent or the seller's permission? No. No. Okay. Unless it's already spelled out in the contract that the buyers are going to obtain the following 3 inspections with the seller's approval, who's going to pay for them, and so on and so forth. The buyer cannot just willy-nilly go out and order any inspections that they want. Now, if they want to order a quote-unquote mold inspection, they need to basically say, we have a concern, we think there's mold, we want to send out the ABC company, okay, and we want to get this inspected, okay. Not that the seller would have an objection to that, but I'm going to put this in the context of a termite inspection, okay. If I order a termite inspection, and now I am presented with a termite inspection as the listing agent and the seller, and let's suppose that escrow falls out of escrow, okay, and now a new buyer comes in, requests a termite inspection. What do I have to do with that termite inspection? I have to disclose it. I have a termite inspection. What if I order 2 different termite inspections? What if I have one termite inspection that says the house needs to be fumigated, but we don't want to pay for the fumigation, that's too much, so we're going to get a second opinion. So we go get a second termite inspection, and the second termite inspection says, no, we don't have to fumigate it, we're just going to spray some chemicals over here in the corner, and instead of paying $2,000, we're going to get it done for $400. If the seller and you as the agents, if you have knowledge of 2 separate termite inspections, what must you do as it relates to your disclosure duties to the buyer? You have to disclose, okay? You can't just give them the cheaper of the termite inspection, okay? You can't give them the termite inspection that says we can do a local treat for $400 without giving them the other professional opinion that says it's going to take a fumigation. Of course, by the way, what would the buyer want to do? If the buyer had an option that said fumigation from Terminex or local treatment from Orkin, you know, $400 or $2,000, what are they going to pick? Buyer's going to want the fumigation because that's a better method of treatment. Okay. Now, bringing that back to the context of a mold inspection, okay. As a general rule, if you're representing buyers, you should not be ordering any sort of inspections on properties without the seller's permission. Okay? And that literally goes for any kind of inspections. If you want to have the city of Ontario come out, you want to call code compliance. Okay? Should you be calling code compliance out to do an inspection on a property without the seller's permission? No, you shouldn't do that. Okay? For a variety of reasons. You may cause the seller heartburn unless you've got a contractual obligation that says that the seller can do that. Okay, so let's go back to my story. I have an area of discoloration in the garage about the size of a thumbprint. The buyer and their agent say, we have a mold problem, okay, and they call out a mold certification inspection company. They do a mold inspection. Okay? So, we find out about this. Oops, I'm sorry. I thought I put that on silent. Let me pass this over to Anna. Okay, sorry about that. So, anyway, they order a mold inspection, and guess what? The company comes back with a report, and the report says, you have mold, okay? And you have, there's a couple of there are some very dangerous types of mold spores, okay? I can't remember the name of the really, really bad one. It's normally the one that's referred to as the black mold. You have toxic black mold, which, by the way, most cases of all the mold and mildews I've seen, and most of the time, what color are they? Black, okay? So distinguishing between the toxic black mold and the non-toxic black mold can be tough. The name of this one, it starts with an S, it's like sticky, stacky borealis or some nonsense like that. But at any rate, if that mold is present, those mold spores are present, and you have a sensitivity to mold spores, or even not, that specific type of mold can really cause you some problems. Okay? So having said that, they do a test, we get a report back, and they say, for $9,000, that's right, we have a thumbprint size of mold. For $9,000, we can remediate your mold problem. Wow. Okay. Now problem number one is, I'm not kidding you, I don't want to minimize this, but this was literally the size of a thumbprint and it was in the garage. Okay? So we immediately have a problem. We have for all intents and purposes, we had a deal killer. You know, the seller was not prepared to do this. The buyer was scared to death. They were not prepared to move forward unless this problem was taken care of, because they were truly concerned they were going to die. They're going to move into this property with their kids and they're going to get sick. Okay? So I go to the termite company. This is the very, or not the termite company. I go to the mold remediation company, and I'm like, okay, help me out here a little bit. Okay? What are you going to do? First, now let me back up. What did you find? Okay? What are you going to do? And what sort of certification, qualification, and licensing status do you have? And what sort of warranty are you going to provide after the fact? Okay? And the answer I get back is, well, this is what we found. We found the ABC mold spores. Okay? And then we took a sample of the thumbprint. That's what we got. And then we went in and we took a jar of air, and we captured a jar of air inside the house, sealed it up, took it back to the lab, and inside the house we found the following mold spores at a concentration of so many parts per billion, and that's unhealthy. Okay. So we got some mold spores in the drywall, thumbprint size. We got a jar full of air throughout the house on the inside, and the mold spores within the jar of air are at an elevated level of parts per billion, and therefore that's the problem. Yes. Okay. Well, what are you going to do? Okay, what are you going to do to fix this? Well, the area in the drywall, we're going to cut out that spot and we're going to remove it. Okay. We're going to come in and we're going to clean your walls. We're going to clean your air ducts, and we're going to ventilate the property. Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, $9,000. You're going to cut out a little spot of drywall. I'm not kidding you. I mean, the area that they were proposing to cut out was less than a foot by a foot to get rid of this one thumbprint. Internally, oh, by the way, when they showed up to their inspection, I met them after the fact. Guess what they had on? They literally had on the space suit, hazmat suit with the rubber booties and the thing. I'm walking through the house with this guy, and he's got a space suit on. Okay? Wow. I said, is it really, really that bad? I mean, I'm not seeing anything. This is the invisible black cloud of mold spores throughout the house. So, at any rate, so going back, we're going to remove this section of drywall. We're going to wash the walls with basically a diluted bleach solution. We're going to clean the air ducts. I don't know if you guys have ever had your air ducts cleaned at your house, but you know, $400, you know, maybe $500 you get your air ducts cleaned. And we're going to ventilate. Okay. $9,000. I'm like, okay, assuming my seller agrees to do this, and assuming we're going to get a second bid, what are you going to give me after that? Like, again, go back to my reference for a termite inspection. When you get a termite inspection done and they say you have a problem, and after they eradicate the problem, they give you a notice of completion, and they basically give you a warranty or a guarantee that says, we stand behind this remediation. And in most cases for termite guys, they got to stand behind it for 2 years. Okay? Now, if you have a problem with your termite guy, by the way, who is the licensing body for termite inspectors? That would be the Structural Pest Control Board, State of California, state regulated agency. The Department of Real Estate regulates us real estate licensees. The Department of Real Estate had some regulation over the mortgage people, and now it's over the Department of Corporations. The Department of Insurance regulates the insurance companies. The California State Contractors Board regulates general contractors when they're out building houses. Who regulates the mold inspectors? Nobody. There is no governing body sanctioned by the state or the Fed that says If you do the following steps and take the following test, you are now a licensed mold inspector / remediator. Now, having said that, a lot of what those folks do, they do under the Contractors Licensing Board. They basically say, I'm a general contractor, and I do that. But there is no licensing body for mold inspectors. Okay? So, therefore, there's also no certification process, standardized certification process for mold inspectors. And therefore, there's also no state agency behind the $9,000 bill and the certification that says, if there was a problem, if we have a problem with the real estate licensee, we can complain to the Department of Real Estate. Yeah. If we have a problem with the termite inspection, we can complain to the Structural Pest Control Board. If we have a problem with our mold inspector, certified mold inspector, nobody to complain to. I haven't done this in a while, but let's do it live and see how it turns out. We're going to just do a quick Google search on certified mold. Look at that, certified mold inspector. It's right there. Okay? So let's see what we got here. And certified mold inspection training, mold remediation. Okay, so the top Google search, other than the paid ads, this actually looks like a school that is Mold Inspection Consulting and Remediation Organization. It's a CMI, okay, Certified Mold Inspector. Now, I'm not going to go through this, but I can assure you, you're not going to find anywhere on here State of California seal, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I don't even know who this would be responsible for. It's the EPA. Not going to find anything here on the EPA. This is the equivalent of you and I getting together, throwing up a website and saying, hey, we're going to offer certified mold inspection class. You come, you take our class, you pay us some money, we're going to pin a badge on you, and you're now going to be able to call yourself a certified mold inspector. Okay? Certified by who and backed by who? Okay? So, right by these guys. It looks pretty official. I mean, they've got a micro up here. They got a little not a magnifying glass, but a microscope. And wow. Okay. So, bottom line is, when I started asking these questions to the inspectors, I realized pretty quickly that, you know, for $9,000, and then by doing the law, the seller and I are sitting back and we're looking at one another and we're saying, well, geez, we could fix that, and we could have painted the entire house, and frankly replaced the air conditioning ducts for less money than the $9,000 that we were going to pay for these folks. So then I started to do some more questions regarding the air samples. I'm like, okay, let's get back to this air samples. You're telling me that the air samples inside the house are at so many parts per billion, and because let's just suppose it's at 30 parts per billion, okay? And that's too much. Okay, too much compared to what? Well, too much compared to the air outside. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, so wait a minute. So you're telling me you take a jar of air inside the house, seal it up. You take a jar of air outside the house, in the backyard, and or in the middle of the street, and you seal it up. And the parts per million of air outside, let's just for example, is 10 billion or 10 million parts per billion or whatever. And the inside is 30 parts per billion. So it's elevated. Correct. That's what I'm telling you. Okay. What if, and again, keep in mind this house was vacant, and this house had been boarded up. Not boarded up, but basically been shut up for months. So I'm like, let's pretend for a moment, before you were to come to do your inspection, we had gone into the property, opened up the windows and opened up the doors and ventilated the property out. Basically brought some of the outside air in and get some of the inside air out. Would that have had an impact on the mold spores? Of course it would. Okay. And what you're also telling me is that the unhealthy air that's 3 times elevated level inside the house is also unhealthy air outside the house. It's just more concentrated inside the house because it hasn't been ventilated. That's correct. But you're also telling me If I was to sit on my couch watching TV in a relaxed state, breathing calmly, and my son is outside in the driveway playing basketball, breathing a little bit heavier, he's still breathing air with mold spores in it, even though they're at a lower concentration, but he's probably breathing them in at a much higher rate than I am, because he's outside exercising, breathing real heavy, and I'm in the house watching television. Yes, Mr. Martin, you've got it. Okay. Now, the reason I tell that story is because I instantly realized there's a problem here. Okay? $9,000 to basically remove a piece of drywall, wipe down some walls, and open some windows. Because once they had done that, then they come back and they get a new jar of air, and guess what? The house is now ventilated, and the parts per billion are down in line with what's outside, and this house is now what? Safe. Okay? So we instantly realized, or I instantly realized, this was a problem. Okay? Now, having said that, at the time this was going on, in fact, it might have even been more than 10, this might have been closer to 15 years ago, there was no mold word in the disclosure. Okay? And if you guys have been in business long enough, I think this was probably around 1996, 1997. Everybody remembers Ed McMahon? Oh, Ed McMahon, sidekick for Johnny Carson. And I may have the companies wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, Ed McMahon filed an insurance claim for mold against State Farm. Okay? He claimed he wasn't well, I think his dog was sick, I think his wife was sick, and there was mold in the house. And you may have seen, I haven't seen any of these in a while, but back during that time, they had 60-minute specials and 20/20 specials, the news magazine specials on television, where they're literally going into houses, and these houses are beautiful. And they're going in with the gas masks on, and there's pictures of the family on the mantle, and everybody's sick and we can't live in the house. Okay? So the bottom line is the public, and by the way, my son has asthma. My youngest son has asthma. If you are a child, young, baby, I don't know, under, let's say 5, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert at this, so if you're watching this on video, don't hold me to it. I'm just kind of giving my analysis of this. But from what I understand, if you are a young child, an older individual, or somebody who has respiratory problems, asthma, an adult with asthma or a child with asthma, you are certainly going to be more sensitive to any sort of allergens in the air, including mold spores, and that's going to be a problem. Okay? But anyway, Ed McMahon files this lawsuit and wins. I don't remember what the ultimate judgment was, but I know that he won. And prior to that time, insurance companies had no exclusions for this sort of stuff. Okay? This was literally groundbreaking. There was no exclusion. Like right now, if you don't have earthquake for insurance, for example, and your house gets destroyed by an earthquake, guess what? Sorry. If you don't have flood insurance and your house gets flooded, guess what? Sorry. Prior to this Ed McMahon situation, there was no exclusions for mold-related claims. Okay? Just like I think after September 11th, everybody who owns a house started getting these addendums and these additions to their insurance policy, which were excluding terrorist acts. Okay? You're not insured for a terrorist act if your house gets blown up by a terrorist. Well, guess what we started to get in the late 90s? We started to get by the way, there was a period of time in California where the insurance carriers stopped writing homeowners insurance in the state of California. Okay? Specifically because of the mold problem. Now, when they started rewriting them, and to my knowledge, every single insurance policy that's ever been issued since that date, I don't know what the date is, I want to say late 1990s, there is an exclusion for mold-related claims. Just like in almost every insurance policy, there's an exclusion for asbestos-related claims. Okay? They're not going to, if you buy a house that has asbestos in it and you get sick, don't turn in an insurance claim to your homeowner's insurance. They're not going to cover it. So now, with these litigation came in, all the insurance companies started to exclude mold. So it's been that way for at least the last 12, 13 years, maybe even a little bit longer. Okay, so with that groundwork in play, and all of the upheaval as far as you're going to get sick, and by the way, if you have mold in your house that looks like this, and it's throughout your entire house, that's a problem. Don't misunderstand me. Okay, I don't know if I have all the pictures in here that I want. I've seen some pictures. Matter of fact, this that looks. I think that's a shower pan, and it's all moldy in the back. If that whole thing on the bottom of behind the shower is all moldy, that's a problem. That needs to be corrected. That's going to go here. Okay, this is I think up in an attic. You've got a couple of beams in here, and you've got serious water damage and mold and fungus and dry rot and stuff in there. That's a problem. Okay, what I'm talking about is not this. Okay, I'm talking about a thumbprint of mildew in a garage. I'm talking about we've all been selling real estate here for a while. I defy anybody, and this may apply to you in your own home, I defy anybody to go into a house, at least more than a few houses, go into the bathroom, pull back the shower curtain, and not maybe find a little bit of a black spot of what most of us would refer to as mildew. Okay? Doesn't mean we're bad housekeepers or whatever it happens to be, but you know, it's pretty tough to keep the mildew completely out of your shower unless you're drying it out all the time. Which, by the way, what does mold need? Mold needs two things in order to live. It needs moisture and a food source. Okay? The food source can be any sort of cellulose material. Wood, drywall, paper on the back of the drywall, okay? And moisture. You eliminate the moisture, the mold cannot survive. You eliminate the food source, which is why mold will not grow on tile. Okay, so you know, if you've got mold in the corner of your shower, it's not growing on the tile. It's probably growing maybe in the grout, or maybe it's a little bit behind in the drywall and it's coming its way out. But mold will not grow on tile. It cannot. It won't live on tile. It has to eat it. It's a spore. Okay, but if you've got mold like this, this is certainly more serious. But most of us are not going to be encountering this. Okay, I have a picture. Unfortunately, it's not pulling up. Where there was a house. The story behind the picture is the homeowners had went on vacation. They were gone for a couple weeks. In the middle of summer, they had a hot water slab leak. Okay, and the slab leak was bad enough that it was actually saturating the carpet throughout the downstairs or whatever. And it had been running hot water. It had been running, and it was in the middle of summer. It was 100 degrees outside, probably over 100 degrees in the house. 2 weeks go by, the people come home, they open their door, and what do they have? They have a sauna, a jungle of sauna. And guess what? The entire inside of the house has got mold spores growing from the ceiling, just all over the place. Okay? Is that a problem? Darn straight, that's a problem. That needs immediate remediation. Most of the time we're not going to experience anything close to that. What we're going to be experiencing is a little bit of mildew in the corner of a shower, maybe a little bit of mildew, mold underneath the kitchen sink, okay, whatever it happens to be. And I don't have the pamphlet with me. When I did this training before, I have it, which you can probably get it from the EPA. Let's just do a quick Google search. Gotta love Google, I gotta tell you. I haven't done this training. In the era of Google, I haven't done this training in a long time. Let's see, EPA mold guide, look at that, okay? So, what do we got here? Which, by the way, I'm a consumer. Who wants my business? These are the paid ads. Mold inspection and testing. OC mold inspectors. Certified mold inspectors. I want the EPA. I want the government inspector. Okay? So, here we go. A brief guide to mold and moisture in your home from the Environmental Protection Agency. And there we go. We got our United States Environment Protection Agency. It gives us a guide, talks about what it is, how to clean it up, and this is what I wanted to get at. Mold cleanup. Who should do cleanup? Cleanup guidelines. Let's take a look at that. Generally speaking, and I haven't looked at this, we're pulling this up together. So hopefully this is gonna, okay. Fix plumbing leaks and other water problems as soon as possible. Okay? Dry all items completely. Number one, eliminate the source of the moisture. Okay? And dry everything out. Number two, scrub mold off hard surfaces with detergent and water. Dry completely. Okay? Now they're talking hard surfaces. Absorbent and porous materials such as ceiling tiles, carpet may have to be thrown out if they become moldy. Mold can grow in or fill in empty spaces and crevices in porous materials, so mold can be difficult or impossible to remove completely. Okay? Now generally speaking, the old brochure that I used to look at basically said, eliminate the moisture problem and clean with a diluted bleach solution. Okay? And a diluted bleach solution. They don't want you pouring a gallon of bleach to clean it up. Take a bottle of water, 9 parts water, 1 part bleach, okay? And clean with a bleach solution. This doesn't even say that. Detergent and water and do what? Dry completely. Okay? So, going back to our example, I have a spot of discoloration the size of my thumb. Based upon this, I'm not even 100% sure we would have completely needed to really remove the entire drywall, but we did, and I think that was safe. Okay, remove the drywall. We had no moisture in the house. We did not have a plumbing leak in the house. We did not have the description that I just described to you guys, where the house had been leaking and the moisture was like a sauna in there. The house was fine. Okay, so. And we had no evidence of, we actually had no evidence of mold spores like on the wall. They weren't testing the walls. It was basically mold spores in the air, elevated levels of mold spores in the air. Ventilate, okay? If you look at the CAR addendum, there's another addendum which we very rarely use. I don't know why we don't use this more on resales, but there's an addendum that we use all the time on our leases. And this is frankly one of the reasons why the title of this class is Whose Mold Is It? Anyway, I normally, when I first started teaching this class, I titled it Whose Mold Is It? In the context of a landlord-tenant setting. A tenant calls me up. It's a little different when we're dealing with buyers and sellers, and most of us here are going to be dealing with buyers and sellers, okay? But in the context of a landlord and tenant, when a tenant calls me up and says, I have a mold problem and you had better get over here immediately to fix it, my initial thought, not that I verbalize it, but my initial thought is, whose mold is this? Is this my mold, landlord, or is it your mold, tenant? And what I mean by that is when I get out and I take a look at, suppose I have a mold problem in the bathroom, okay? And I said, wow, I look at my move-in pictures. I said, well, before you moved in, this area in the bathroom looked great. Matter of fact, you even signed off that it looked great. Now, I have the entire ceiling and windows and walls are covered with discoloration. Toxic black mold. Whether it's toxic, I have no idea, okay? But now I sit back and say, well, how long have you been here? Well, I've been in this house for a year. And, okay, we have a problem because you're calling me to eliminate a mold problem. But now I get to ask the question as well, and actually I've already answered it. Whose mold is this? Is this my mold or is it your mold? And in the example I just gave you, whose mold is it? It's their mold. Why do they have a mold problem in the bathroom? They have a mold problem in the bathroom is because apparently they never open a window, they never ventilate, they are in there taking showers apparently and steaming the room up 24/7, and they don't ventilate the bathroom, which is what this is a CAR form, lease and residential mold and ventilation addendum. And basically, this is the part I wanted to show you, and this certainly applies to everything that we do on a resale site. I'm just going to go through these 10 points, or 9 points actually. Maintain the premises free of dirt, debris, and moisture that can harbor mold. Yes, dirt and debris and moisture. Well, dirt and debris harbor the mold, the moisture causes the mold. So if I am in a bathroom and it is filthy, okay, filthy dirty, just lint and wet towels behind the toilet that have been sitting there for 3 months, okay, that's going to harbor mold, okay. Clean any mildew or mold that appears in the appropriate cleaner with an appropriate cleaner designed to kill mold. We all have it in our kitchen sink. We've all got the 409 with bleach or whatever it happens to be. You've got to clean up after yourself here a little bit. Clean and dry any visible moisture on windows, walls, or surfaces, including personal property, as quickly as possible. If you are the type of person who takes the 5-hour showers and makes it into a steam room so that the bathroom is dripping with moisture, are you going to have a problem? Yes, you are going to have a problem. Use reasonable care to close all windows and other openings of premises to prevent water from entering the premises. Okay, so don't let it rain, but then at the same time, use exhaust fans, if any, in bathrooms and kitchen while using this facility. To notify landlord if exhaust fans are not operative. But then I think it says somewhere in here as well, I tell them just the opposite. I said, keep the windows closed when it's raining, but open the windows when you're using the shower, okay? In the appropriate time of the year. I don't expect them to do that when it's snowing outside or something like that. But the bottom line, this whole thing talks about common sense, okay? Immediately notify landlord of water intrusions. Now let's get away from a little bit of the issue with this particular case. Let's go back and determine whose mold is this. Now the tenant calls me and says, hey, I think I have a mold problem. I'm like, okay. I come out and I take a look and I look behind the toilet and the bathroom's immaculate. Everything's clean, everything's dry. Doesn't appear to be any. The house is clean. There doesn't appear to be any misuse or abuse on the part of the tenant at all. I go and I look behind the toilet and I see a baseboard that's looking pretty bad. Okay. It's obvious that the tenant's not doing anything out of the ordinary. I said, you know what, let me get my guy to come out here and take a look at this. Guy gets out there, discovers that the pipe behind the toilet's maybe been leaking for several days, if not maybe a week or a month, depending on the problem. They pull it out, and guess what? The whole thing in the back is just completely water damaged, and guess what? We have the M word. We've got some mold that started. Now, whose mold is that? Is that the tenant's mold, or is that my mold? It's my mold. Okay? It's nothing that they did. Now, if they had let that go and go and go and go and go and go and go, and then they call me 6 months later, and now I come out, and instead of having a little bit of a problem on a baseboard, the entire bathroom, and we look at it and say, my God, how long has it been doing this? Oh, it's been like this for about 6 months. And you just called me now? Well, it didn't seem that bad. Now, even though that the cause of that was maybe a plumbing leak that was technically our side, I'm going to go back to my landlord or my tenant in that particular case and say, this is your problem. We'll fix the plumbing, but you have allowed this problem to become so bad, okay? If you had just followed these, this is kind of what it gets to here. Notify landlord immediately of water intrusion, including not limited to roof, plumbing leaks, so on and so forth. Okay, so I like this form. Now, we don't use this form on buy-sell transactions, okay? And we don't normally use this form on buy-sell transactions because by this time it's too late. So if we go back to our photos, and we've got this looks like some drywall. These photos are not the greatest in the world, but this is the kind of typical stuff you see. You know, there was probably some moisture behind the wall. They took off the dry. I think these pictures are terrible, but you know, basically you get the gist of it. You know, the back of this drywall is all moldy and mildewy. That's the very typical stuff. Now, this is generally my recommendation when you run into these type of mold problems, okay? Especially on the transactional stuff. You're now getting ready to close escrow, okay? Buyer does a walkthrough. They look underneath the bathroom sink. You've got a problem. You know, there's been a plumbing problem. Looks like there's I see like a little bit of an issue over there. Home inspector comes out and says we need further investigation, okay? Normally, which by the way, normally licensed contractors are who you are looking for on this, okay? You're going to have a general contractor come out, there are all sorts of certifications that a general contractor can get that says, yes, we're experienced in dealing with mold, and then they'll come out and they'll do remediation, okay? The nice part about dealing with a general contractor is if the general contractor comes out, does some mold remediation, and maybe does a poor job at it, who do you get to go after? Well, you get to go after their license through the Structural Pest Control, or excuse me, through the General State of California Contractor Licensing Board. Okay, so you actually have, kind of like us as a real estate agent, if we do a poor job on a transaction, well, the consumer can go to the broker, and if they don't get satisfaction from the broker, they can go to the Department of Real Estate. Okay, same sort of way with the consumer has a problem with mold remediation. You know, they can go to the general contractor. Your firm came out and did this work, okay? And if you can't satisfy me that, you know, the work has been done satisfactorily, then they can go to the State of California Contractors Licensing Board, okay? Whereas, and again, not to pick on that, I'm not even going to bring their website up again, but if you do a Google search and you're just finding a company that says, hey, now they may be general contractors, and they may have license, and may have insurance, and they may be bonded, and all the rest of that sort of stuff. That's fine, but a lot of these companies aren't. They're just literally just out saying, hey, we do this. Now keep in mind, there are, well actually I will go back to the website. Was it this one? Here.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, let's run another one. Let's do another Google search. And on this one we want to do mold testing.
Molding testing?
Molding testing?
Mold testing, okay.
Mold testing. Oh, we got a kit. Look at that kit. Labs. Mold testing labs. Okay. So there we go. We do it real quick. Oh, guess what? Looks like we almost have this. Looks like we got the same kind of suspects coming in. Is there an industry built around mold inspection?
Mm-hmm.
Is there big money in it? Darn straight, because people are terrified of it. Okay. Now these people may actually do the laboratory inspections, and I don't know whether this is one or not, and this could be absolute bogus, but let's just pretend for a moment that, well, we've got another microscope up here, okay? Now what these guys do is, again, and by the way, most of the inspection companies, and certainly the general contracting companies, they don't have laboratories set up to test this stuff. Okay, you got to get a sample, you got to get it over to them, you got to, and then they test it. And again, there are, I'm exaggerating. I was going to say thousands of different types of molds. There very well may be thousands of different types of molds, but there are certainly dozens, if not hundreds, of different types of molds and mold spores. Okay. Again, not to minimize it, some of them could have serious health effects. Again, my son, I'm sensitive to this. My son has asthma, okay? And if he was in a environment with elevated mold spores, so many parts per billion, there is no doubt in my mind that that could be sensitive to him. It could cause him some breathing and respiration problems, and that would not be an environment that he wants to be in. Now, for most of us who are not have those type of conditions, or not have asthma or sensitive, I mean, my son's, he's going to be 20 years old. He hasn't had an asthma attack in years up until about 4 months ago. Actually, less than that, the week before Thanksgiving. We're out in the desert, we're riding some motorcycles, we've been out in the dust all day, and we've been sitting by a campfire all night. We all go into the motorhome. Everyone's sleeping like a baby, except my son, who is sensitive to the dust particulates and the smoke particulates and been riding motorcycles. Well, is that a problem? That's a problem. The challenge for us as it relates to our business practice is how do you deal with this from a liability standpoint in a transaction? Because the last thing in the world you want to do is you want to sell a house to a client, have them move in, then have them turn around and say, my family is sick and it's your fault because you, oops, I'm on the wrong form, on the transfer disclosure statement, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer's agent, seller's agent, listing agent, you failed to disclose the presence of mold. Page 2. And my mold word, right down there. Page 2, section C.1 or C.1, you know, is there evidence of mold? Okay? You don't want to be in a situation where you're ever accused of covering up, failing to disclose any sort of mold situation. Okay? Ever. Now, a lot of the banks out there, if I send an email to an asset manager and it says, hey, we've inspected the property and you know their buyer's concerned about mold in the, you know, underneath the kitchen sink, I will immediately get a reply back in many cases, meaning, you mean, Lance, there's discoloration under the kitchen sink. And what they're basically telling me is, are you one of these guys, Lance? Are you qualified to say that it's mold? Okay, yet alone toxic black mold. Because I cannot tell you how many times I have had a home inspection done by a buyer, not necessarily a home inspector, but a home inspection done by a buyer and their agent, and then I get a request for repair back that says toxic black mold under the kitchen sink. Okay, well, did you have it tested? Is it toxic? Okay, keep in mind, if there's two things in this world, actually there's probably more than two, but there's certainly at least two things in this world that we need extremely badly. And in our real estate business, we don't like either one of them. We don't like termites, and we don't like mold. But if we didn't have termites, and we didn't have mold, we would be up to our eyeballs in stuff, okay? This stuff needs to decay, okay? Okay, when you go to the landfill, you go to the dump, if a tree falls down, we would have millions of years of undecayed trees if we didn't have termites and mold and fungus and all the rest of that sort of stuff to break this stuff. This occurs naturally in our environment, okay? So that's one of the challenges when it comes to the health risks of dealing with a mold problem. Because what you're basically saying, if you want to have a property that is in effect, I want to go back to my transfer disclosure statement, you want to have a property that in effect is mold free, well, that's probably something that you could accommodate internally, okay? I can do what I can keep my house clean, I can keep it dry, I can keep the moisture, I can keep it ventilated, and internally, depending on where I live in my environment, I can probably do a pretty good job of keeping the mold spores down. What happens when I go outside? How can we control that? There are literally, we are breathing in mold spores right now in super minute particles, okay? We go outside, you take a walk across your grass, maybe you go through your garden. What are you picking up on the bottom of your shoes? Picking up mold spores. They're everywhere. They've been around since the beginning of time. They're going to be around for the beginning of time. So when it comes time for us to manage these, this is basically what I'm getting here with this narration. First of all, if you see anything even close to this, or anything that looks like a mildew or a mold problem, this is another one. Again, look at the guy, he's got his mask on, okay? And that may be super toxic. I don't know, okay? But first things first, listing agents, buyer's agents, if you see a discoloration problem, and even if we want to get cute with the language, we're not going to call it mold, we're going to say it's mildew, or we're going to say it's discoloration. You have a duty, an absolute duty, to disclose to the consumer, disclose to the buyer, that we have discoloration under the kitchen sink. It may be mold. Okay? Let's get this checked out. By the way, do home inspectors test for this stuff? Not normally test. They'll normally inspect, and they'll kind of do the same thing that we just did. They'll look underneath the kitchen sink, they'll see a plumbing leak, and then they'll basically say, you may have a mildew or mold problem underneath or you do have a mildew or mold problem underneath the kitchen sink. Eliminate the water, remove the damaged area, replace it, and ventilate. Okay? The challenge, of course, is who does it, how much are they going to spend, and then what are you going to get when you're done? Okay? What sort of, because that's the big challenge. If, unlike what we mentioned earlier, unlike a termite inspector now going out and saying the property is free and clear of termites, we now have a notice of completion, and I certify that there are no live infestation of termites in 123 Main Street. You're never going to get that from a mold inspector. You're never going to get that. So this is where it gets really tricky. You have a listing representing your seller. You have a buying side representing, of course, the buyer. Now there is an issue. You've got to be very careful on how you address the remediation. First of all, spending $9,000, which, by the way, we didn't spend $9,000. And guess what happened to that transaction? That transaction died. We resold it. What did we have to do with our inspection report? We gave it to the new buyer. And we had this conversation with them. Say, hey, this company came out, they wanted $9,000 to fix that. Buyer was unconcerned compared to the first buyer. Did we correct that? Yes, we did. Guess what we did? We cut it out. That was it. We cut it out. The seller did it himself. Okay? Disclosed to the buyer. The prior buyer had a concern about mold issues. This is what we did. If you have a concern about it, then you can have your mold inspector, which, by the way, has anybody in the room ever had a mold inspection done? Okay. I've never had a mold inspection done because, again, I don't know who to call. I don't know if these people are, well, actually this is from the EPA site, but as we do the Google search on, matter of fact, let's see how many million of those searches come up. I didn't see the, let's do California, let's do mold inspector, let's just do Los Angeles County, how's that? And
150.
1.5 million. 1.5 million results. Okay, and it got, boy, I gotta tell you, well, I've got a new one. LosAngelesRestoration.com. So, this is one reason, and again, I'm digressing here a little bit. Has anybody ever had a problem with a water leak, emergency plumbing leak, getting ready to close escrow, you know, the day before close of escrow, you go over to the property to do the walkthrough, and the pipe upstairs had burst and the whole house is flooded? Okay. Is it important to get that taken care of quickly?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. First things first, get the water problem solved. Second thing, remove the moisture. Okay. If the drywall is saturated at a minimum, you're going to cut. Normally you'll see them, they cut holes, they remove the bottom. Sometimes they'll knock some holes in the interior of the walls. What are they trying to do? Ventilate. You want to ventilate that out. Okay. You've got the carpet soaked. Normally, if you don't get rid of the carpet completely, at a minimum, normally you remove the carpet, you get rid of the pad. It's almost impossible. Carpet can dry out pretty good. Pretty difficult to get a pad to dry out, carpet padding. You remove the carpet pad, you get the fans blowing, and you dry it out. What they're attempting to do is mediate mold growth, because mold will grow. Okay? The reason is, now again, you have a perfect house. It's brand new. It's never been moved into. It now has a water problem. It is not corrected. Will mold spores grow in that house? Yes, they will, because where are the mold spores? They're in the air. They're floating around. We got them on our shoes, or they're attached to our jackets. We go out. You know, you walk through the backyard. You brush against a tree. You know, you get these spores all over the place. Okay. So again, you have people that have allergies, hay fever, and all the rest of that sort of stuff. When do they get that? They get that when the pollen spores in the air are heavy during those times of the year. Okay? Thank God I don't have that problem. I'm not sensitive to that sort of stuff. My youngest son, oh my God. We went on a houseboat trip up in the Delta, and it was in the April, May, or the growing season. I mean, you could just see the pollen blowing in the air and the little cattails, and the air was just thick with just spores. Person like that just wipes them out. Okay? So at any rate, but the brand new house, those mold spores will grow. The point I'm trying to make is you can never tell your client, kind of like you can never tell them your house is ever free and clear of termites. By the way, if I fumigate somebody's house, when they take off the tent, I can say there are no termites in this property. Can I say that the next day? No. I cannot say that the next day. If they're drywood termites, is what you fumigate a house for, when they fumigate the house, everything in that house is dead. Every single termite is dead. The spiders are dead. The cockroaches are dead. The mice are dead. The thing is dead. What happens when you take the tent back off? Can the mouse run back in from the field? Is it going to die? No. Better not die, because the people that walk back in would die. If a termite flies in, termites swarm a couple times a year. They'll swarm after it rains, hot, humid weather. The house next door has termites. The dead tree in the backyard has termites. Take the tent off. They swarm that afternoon. They get back into the roof. Is that, the fact that they fumigated that house yesterday, is that going to kill that new termite that just swarmed into the roof? No. Okay? So you kind of got to think of mold eradication in the same way that you'll think of a termite eradication. You can never say you're never going to have, there's mold spores in this room right now. We have not had any plumbing problems in here. We have not had any, and again, that air sample test, Shirley came in a little bit late. If we were to grab a jar of air in here, send it over to the lab, they're going to come back and they're going to say there are mold spores present in this air. And hopefully they're going to say they're at a level of parts per billion that's within what normal human beings can withstand. Okay? So, I want to wrap this up in the following way. I want to go back to our disclosures. And I know I've pointed this out a couple of times, and I know it's a very small little paragraph. But if you look at page 2, C1, this is the seller's disclosure, by the way. Okay? We have to acknowledge it as well. Substances, materials, or products which may be environmental hazards, such as, but not limited to. Okay, we all know the asbestos. Now, asbestos is not as much of a problem for us today as it was before, because they don't build anything, especially from a housing standpoint, that contains asbestos material in them. I used to manage houses over at March Air Force Base. Those houses were built in the 1920s. Is there asbestos in those houses? Absolutely. Today. And there's people living in them. Okay? Is that a problem? No. Not as long as you don't disturb. The thing with asbestos is when asbestos gets airborne and asbestos gets inhaled, that's when you have the problem. That's the mesothelioma stuff, the lung cancer that you get. If you have, back in the day, asbestos is a miraculous substance. Okay? We used to use it for insulation. They used to insulate pipes coming out of the house, super fire resistant. They used to make insulation out of it. They used to make the popcorn ceilings. Contained asbestos. Now, if you have a house right now that's an old house and you have asbestos in your popcorn ceilings, number one, as a real estate agent, do we disclose it? Of course we do, assuming we know it. Is that a health risk for the occupants of the house? It should not be a health risk unless I think I want to get rid of this asbestos popcorn ceiling because that's old school and I want to redo it, I want to texture it. So I think I'm just going to go up there, I'm just going to scrape it all off. So I'm now scraping off all of my asbestos. I am now atomizing it and putting it into the air. I don't have a mask on, and what am I doing? I'm breathing in the asbestos. That's when the asbestos becomes a problem, is when you disturb it. Asbestos was very popular in glues. Okay, they would make a very good adhesive, and it would be one of the compounds that they would put in adhesive, and they would take asbestos and they would use asbestos to glue down flooring tiles. Again, March Air Force Base. If you go over to March Air Force Base and you pull back the old layers of vinyl and linoleum, you get back to the original vinyl squares that they stuck down in the 1930s in the kitchen, and you want to peel those off, the glue behind it is black. If you guys have ever worked in an old house, you probably know what I'm talking about. You get that black glue. Well, this glue is messing up. We have to get this surface cleaned up because we're going to put in a new floor, right? So let's break out the sander and let's sand all of that black glue down so we got a nice surface. And what am I doing? I'm putting it in the dust, and now I've got an asbestos problem. So the reason I'm telling you asbestos is because it goes hand in hand with mold. It's the same sort of deal. Formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is a material that they use in a lot of plastic. There may be, I don't know, this chair may have formaldehyde in it. Okay? Nor the foam. The foam cushions, a lot of foam cushions are made with the formaldehyde material. Okay? That formaldehyde is known by the state of California to cause cancer. Okay? Now, we don't use formaldehyde for the most part in the residential construction of houses, but where do you find stickers where it says, hey, this property may be contained with formaldehyde? Well, mortuary too. Mobile homes. Okay? You sell my motor home. I flip down the visor of my motor home and it says right on there. There's some of the materials used in the construction and of this motorhome contain formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is known by the state of California to cause cancer. Okay, now motorhomes are kind of in the same realm of a mobile home. Do we sell mobile homes on occasion? Yeah, some of the older mobile homes could have formaldehyde. You need to disclose that. Radon gas. We're going to briefly talk. We don't really have much of a radon gas problem in our area, but other parts of the country, radon gas is a big deal. Okay, like mold and mold spores, radon gas is natural. Okay, it comes up from the ground. There's nothing we can do to stop the radon gas from coming out of the ground. It just naturally seeps out of the ground, and it will forever. The problem is, what's the problem with radon gas? Ventilation. Same thing with the mold spores. Where radon gas becomes a big problem is in a lot of parts of the country where they have basements, okay? And the basements are all sealed up really good, and the radon gas is kind of seeping out through the basement floor, coming up through the foundation. And now they've turned the basement into a little living space for Johnny. Johnny lives in the basement, okay? Well, now there's a radon gas problem. How do you correct the radon gas problem? Ventilate. Okay, there's other things that can be done, but the main thing is ventilation. Lead-based paint. Lead-based paint basically has not been made since 1978, I think is the window when we stopped. But again, getting from a disclosure standpoint, if you're going to disclose, if you're selling an older house, if you're selling a house built pre-1978, number one, we have to do the lead disclosure, which, by the way, in our office, you should be doing the lead-based paint disclosure anyway. I don't care if the house was built in 2012. Okay? Well, Lance, that's kind of, and you believe me, I used to say, Lance, that's silly. I mean, the house was built in 1999. You hadn't made lead-based paint for a while. Well, okay, but now we're selling that house 10 years early, or 10 years later. Is it possible that I own my house and I wanted to repaint little Johnny's bedroom, and I was over at Grandpa's house last weekend and he had this beautiful can of blue paint that's been sitting there and it looked really old, and I opened it up and said, it's still good, and I'm going to go and I'm going to paint little Johnny's bedroom with a can of 1972 paint? Is it possible? It's possible, which is why we don't necessarily disclose. Now, if we know the houses have lead-based paint, we have to disclose it. Old houses, if you're selling an old house, 1930 vintage house, okay, is there lead-based paint in that house? Darn straight there's lead-based paint in there. There's no way around it. Unless that house was completely stripped down to the bare wood and repainted, that house has lead-based paint. Is that a health problem? It can be if that lead-based paint is basically digested or inhaled. Okay? You've got peeling paint up on the fascia. Okay? If it's not peeling and you've got layer after layer of good paint, you've got 30 layers of paint on there, and the oldest layer of paint is lead-based paint, but it's all been basically contained and sealed, that's not a problem. Where it becomes a problem is that I want to scrape all that paint off of the eave, and I want to repaint it. Now I'm up there with my scraper, and I'm disturbing it, and I'm atomizing it, and I'm breathing it in. Or the typical example we use is the older houses, and you have the grandkids over, and you've got the rail, window rail, and what do kids like to do? That the little kid's sitting there chewing on. I mean, that's the example I've heard for years. That's when I took this class, 25 years ago. That was the example. You got the grandkids over there chewing on the furniture and chewing on the windowsills and eating the lead-based paint. And that's bad news. I mean, there's definitely clinical studies that will, learning impairment and what have you, especially for littler kids. I guess the older you get, it's not that big of a deal. I think all of us in this room could probably drink a gallon of lead-based paint, and we probably would be fine. But when you're young and you're in that developmental stage, that's a problem. Okay, so that gets us to our mold. And again, this word was not here before. It was not in the disclosure. We make a big deal about it, but the reason I go through and I explain all of these, mold is one of many things that we have to be concerned about from a disclosure standpoint. Okay? Is it expensive to remove asbestos? Sure is. Is it expensive to remove lead-based paint? It sure is. But what's the difference when let's assume I do a complete and thorough lead-based paint removal and asbestos removal, okay? Can I have some confidence that my asbestos is not going to come back and my lead-based paint is not going to come back? Yeah, it's gone. If I ventilate out my radon gas and my mold and I clean it up, can I have confidence that I'm never going to have a radon gas or a mold problem again? No. If I don't ventilate my house, I mean, are you guys watching these hoarders movies at all? These hoarder things? I'm addicted to these cable TV things, the gold rushes and the
hoarder.
Yeah. Well, the hoarders I have a hard time watching, but I got to tell you, I've stopped on that channel, and I've looked at that, and I've had some clients that have had that, and I didn't realize they were hoarders at the time. I just thought they were pigs. Okay, but now looking back, I've had clients that look just like those folks on TV. And now I realize, boy, there was a lot more going on there than just they were pack rats, okay? You talk about a mold problem. You got that stuff stacked up knee deep and the kitchen hasn't been used and there's, well, I mean, my God, these people are living like that. But anyway, once it's there, again, even if we clean that house up, you reintroduce the mold, you reintroduce less than sanitary conditions, your mold's going to come back, so we're going to disclose it. Fuel, and again, we're a little off topic, but I want to go through the rest of this paragraph because it's important. Full disclosure, I'm 45 years old. When I was a kid, I lived in Lakewood, and we were not as environmentally conscious back when I was 15, maybe as we are today. We would change the motor oil on my Volkswagen Bug. We didn't have all of these cool little containers and go down to Pet Boys and drop it off for free. We'd dig a hole in the backyard, pour motor oil in the ground, okay? And this was just 15 years. I can only imagine what they would do 30, 40, 50 years ago. Nobody thought about this stuff, whether it was going to be a problem. So if you have fuel disposed, and this is also talking about storage tanks and all the rest of that sort of stuff, but if you have, I mean, if I was to sell the property that I used to live in as a kid in Lakewood, I would have to disclose that, hey, see that corner of the backyard over there where nothing grows? Well, that's where my dad and my brother and me have been pouring used motor oil. Now, we haven't done it in the last 30 years, but for the 30 years before that, that's where all the used motor oil from the cars went. Okay? Got to disclose that stuff. Now, technically, my God, I would have no idea what it would cost to remediate that. I mean, it's probably been so old, it's probably been all eaten by microbes, and it's probably not even there. But maybe the ivy's growing back in that corner. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been there. But you have to disclose that and get rid of that. Storage tanks, contaminated soil, which it looks like maybe is what we might have done, and then water. Contaminated soil and or water. So, this is a no-brainer. Now, the reason I've spent 10 minutes talking about this paragraph is what do we normally do when it comes to this? Seller, this is the seller, by the way, to the best of your knowledge, are you aware of any of the following? Right? No? Well, first of all, we should not be filling this form out for our clients. Sellers need to fill this form out for themselves. But you really do need to do your due diligence. Okay? You as a listing agent, and now again, if you're the listing agent, you're going to sit down with your seller and you're going to have this conversation. But in either case, we need to do our due diligence. This looks like a really old house. When was this built? 1950. this looks like there's 40 layers of paint on the outside of this house. Yeah, Lance, I think you're right. Okay, well then guess what? We have lead-based paint. We're checking yes. Okay? Now again, we're not experts, but when you have a little bit of extra additional knowledge, the longer you're in this business, the more knowledge you get. You happen to, it's an old house. Now you're down in the basement, you see these big pipes coming out that are ventilating the furnace or whatever. Well, when you see what an asbestos pipe looks like, once you've seen one, you'll know it the next time you see it. Well, guess what? You have asbestos vent pipes ventilating the water heater in the basement. Really? Yeah. I've seen them before. The thing's 60 years old. It's as good as new. Which, by the way, are those pipes a problem? As long as they're not broken, they're not a problem. As long as the asbestos pipe is solid and it's not disturbed, it's not a problem. When that pipe cracks and the fibers in the pipe are exposed, now you've got a problem. So we need to disclose all that. And again, getting back to our specific topic today of mold, this is the deal. In today's environment, even though I'm kind of minimizing the mold, although I'm not minimizing this, when we see this, I'm not minimizing this. This needs to be addressed. I'm kind of minimizing the thumbprint in the garage, a little bit of mildew underneath the kitchen sink. In any case, disclose, disclose, disclose. And then whatever you do, do not put yourself in a situation of remediation. You are not the remediator. Now if the seller says, and the buyer agrees, we're going to fix the pipe, and we're that little area underneath the kitchen sink, we're going to cut that board out. We're going to take a picture so you'll see that there's no additional damage underneath. And if there is additional damage underneath, we're going to remove that piece. And we're going to replace it with a new board, and we're going to paint it over. If the seller says they want to do that, and they're going to have their contractor do that, and the buyer says, I'm okay with that, then fine. And just put your disclosure, hey, evidence of discoloration in the kitchen sink, seller to correct, buyer signs off, everybody's fine. What you do not want to do is you do not want to, how many of us agents have ever taken a screwdriver and fixed a doorknob or done that sort of stuff, okay? We've all done it. And if you haven't done it yet, you will, okay? We all get, flip the light on there for me, Shirley. Sure. We all get in those situations where, I used to keep a whole thing of tools in my backyard, and Windex, and screwdrivers, and all that stuff. But the last thing in the world I want to do is now say, it's one thing for me to say, hey, I tightened up the doorknob for you, it was item number 6 on the walkthrough. Now potentially I could expose myself to liability, somebody comes over there, grabs the doorknob, breaks it off, and busts their knuckle, and now they're going to sue me because I did a poor job. I'm willing to take that risk, okay? I'm willing to take the risk that I can tighten up a doorknob, okay? What I'm not willing to take the risk, and I don't want you guys to take the risk, that says, hey, that little bit of discoloration and mildew under the kitchen sink, don't worry about that. I took care of that for you. I cleaned it up and I painted some Kills over it. You know what Kills is? It's like a sealant. Okay? Are you asking for trouble? You're asking for trouble. Because now who corrected the mold problem? You did. Okay? Are we a licensed mold person? No. Do we have an insurance policy that says we can go out and correct this sort of stuff? No. Who normally does? Who normally has the insurance policy and the license to go out and remove, let's use my kitchen sink example. We're going to fix the leak, we're going to remove the damage, we're going to replace it. Who normally has the license and the insurance to do that? Contractors. General contractors. So if you do ever go back and you happen to have a client that says, well, I want to go to, I want to go to these guys, okay, then I would suggest you say, okay, well, let's just make sure they've got a general contractor's license and let's make sure they've got insurance. Because if something goes bad, we want to be able to at least go after, because the mold inspection certification isn't going to get us anywhere. There's nothing we can do with that. It's just a piece of paper, okay? But we want to be able to go after the general contractor's license. Okay. Questions? You guys have been really quiet today. I see a hand up. Yes, sir.
So it sounds like basically everything we talked about, I mean, just the fact of the unknown. I mean, everybody should be checking yes. What's the absolute, like, definitive factor that, okay, this needs to be called out and addressed besides the obvious like that?
Well, I think the obvious, well, again, this is the super obvious, okay? And normally everyone's going to catch this. The buyer's going to catch it, the buyer's agent's going to catch it, everybody, they're going to catch it, okay? It's the more subtle ones. The house is beautiful. You go into the guest bathroom, you pull back the shower curtain, and you've got a little bit of black mildew in the grout or in the caulking. Do you then go, where'd my TDS go? Do you then come back to the TDS and check yes, scroll down to the bottom and say, noticed a little bit of discoloration in the caulking in the rear bathroom in the corner? Yeah, you do. Okay. Now, do most agents do that? Probably not. Because frankly, most agents, most sellers, and most buyers, when you point that out, they're going to be like, okay, that's what you're talking about? And boy, the house I'm leaving has got a worse mildew problem than that. Okay. Same thing with under the kitchen sink. I mean, you can have the most beautiful house in the world, and you know what? You open up the kitchen sink, and if you're like me, every 5 years, I guess, you get a wild hair, and you start cleaning everything out, and then you get up there and you're like, wow, looks like something must have leaked in here maybe like a year ago. Something spilled because in that far back corner, right? Which is why this is where this stuff comes up. I mention the kitchen sink all the time because most of the time when you look under the kitchen sink, you don't see anything. There's a trash can under there. There's a whole bunch of cans and boxes and stuff. And then when do you notice it? Well, it's time to move, right? I'm moving out. Oh, crud. Man, honey, looks like we had a little water problem. That dishwasher line maybe looks like it's been dripping ever so slowly. And now what do we got? Now, again, for me personally, I don't freak out about any of that stuff. I'll stick my nose right in there and cut it out and probably breathe in some stuff I'm not supposed to, and maybe 10 years from now I'm going to die of something. I don't know. That stuff doesn't freak me out at all. And the reality is, I think for most of our consumers, it probably doesn't bother them either. The problem is we're not doing this we're doing this for the small percentage of our consumers who are going to freak out. There's mold. And then, of course, I deal with this a lot on our landlord tenants, okay? Because we manage, over the last 20 years, I have managed far more properties than we've sold. We've managed thousands and thousands of properties, tenants coming, tenants going, okay? And normally on a transaction, if I have a small problem with water, it's dealt with quickly and I never hear about it. Matter of fact, by the way, other than the story I've told you previously, my $9,000 bid, I have had several properties in escrow with mold issues. None of them, except for that one, have caused the escrow not to close. And I have never, in 25 years, had a problem after close of escrow where a buyer has subsequently came back to me or my seller and said, I'm sick and it's your fault. Now, that's on sale transactions. On landlord-tenant, a couple times a year. A couple times a year, I will have a tenant that will call me. I'm sick. My family's sick. And it's got to be the house. And it's got to be the water problem that we have. And how do you respond to that? How do you prove it, number one, and then how do you disprove it? Yeah. How do you prove or disprove that little Johnny's asthma problem is a result of living in this house? Everybody else in the house is fine. Or, again, I've had tenants where everybody in the house is sick. And I go, oh, there's got to be a problem. There's something wrong with this house. My grandma does this. My grandma is convinced that there's something in her house that's killing her. My grandma's 92 years old. Okay, I don't know if there's something in her house that's killing her, but for 92, she's in pretty darn good shape. But you'll go over, you'll look at the house. I see no water. I don't see any discoloration. I don't see any evidence of any problems. Yet everybody in the house is sick. Okay, don't know what to tell you. Maybe you better move. Which, by the way, that's exactly what we tell them. Again, I'm talking landlord-tenant issues now. If I have a tenant who is absolutely convinced that they are ill and they are sick because of the house, let them out of the lease immediately. You can move tomorrow. Now, if there's evidence of a water problem or a mold problem or something like that, correct it immediately. And if they're still not satisfied, you can move out of the house anytime you want. But to answer your question, I think you basically want to err on the side of caution. You disclose. Now, if you don't see any evidence of mold anywhere in the house, of course, you're going to check the no box. But within all of the disclosures, there's lots of stuff in there that says the buyer has the opportunity to perform inspections and all the rest of this sort of stuff. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be in a situation where specifically after close of escrow, okay, the day after close of escrow, a buyer is now calling up their agent, especially if, well, it doesn't matter whether you're the buyer's agent or not, and they are saying, hey, come over to the house. And they are pointing out the most obvious problem that you obviously never looked at, okay? Now, you could also say, well, wait a minute, you were in the house 15 times too, and you never looked up and saw the ceiling stain in the living room that's just growing, you know, fungus and spores all over the place. But you got to remember, we have a duty. We have a duty on the TDS and on the agent visual inspection. Let's go to page. Okay, this is the agent side. The undersigned, based on a reasonable, competent, diligent visual inspection of the accessible areas. You mentioned earlier, well, it's not accessible. There's our get out of jail free card. We don't have X-ray vision. Okay, so if the buyer 2 days after close of escrow decides, hey, we're going to do a room addition, let's start taking this wall out. Okay, and they pull that wall out and they say, oh, look at all this problem. Come on. Accessible areas. Now, if you know for a fact that there was a problem there and the seller freshly painted that wall and you helped them, that's fraud. That's misrepresentation. If they pull a fingerprint off of the baseboard that your fingerprint stuck in the fresh paint, then you're in trouble. But anyway, we have, now again, this is within the scope. By the way, I have a general contractor's license. I don't know if you guys know that. You mentioned REO Asset earlier. I own REO Asset Maintenance. That's my company. I am exposed greatly. I'm the broker in the office, so I've got all the liability as it relates to that. And which is why REO Asset does very little work, if any work, on the houses that I sell. Okay? Because I, as the listing broker, forget the REOs, I don't do any work on the REOs. But I, as a listing broker, I also have a general contractor's license. So I got like a triple exposure, because you guys are regular agents. I'm assuming none of you have a contractor's license here. You do not have a duty to have knowledge above and beyond what a normal realtor would have. And the argument could be made is that an average realtor probably should have more knowledge than just your average public, because we're dealing with houses all the time. Okay? But I go out and I do inspection. I'm at a higher standard because I have a general contractor's license, and that's the standard I'm held to. So believe me, when I go out and do these inspections, I'm being super careful. You guys could look at an angle stop on a toilet. So yeah, the angle stop looks fine. I can look at an angle stop in a toilet, and I'm supposed to have a general idea. Wow, look at that thing. That thing looks like it's 110 years old and it's ready to fail. And I need to disclose that. You can look at it and say, fine with me. I didn't say without it before. Everything's fine. Okay. But again, if there's any evidence that we haven't done the diligent and competent inspection, we're in trouble. And again, this is just on the TDS. We talked about this in another class. Visual inspection disclosure, the AVID form. Okay, AVID form is what, 4 pages now?
Yeah.
And it goes room by room. How's the bedroom look? How's the first bathroom look? How's the kitchen look? How's the garage look? If you guys aren't filling those out and going, it doesn't take that long. Come on, man, we're in escrow for 30, 40 days, 60 days. Go out there in the beginning, take as long as it takes, if it's 10 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes, and walk through the property. And specifically on our mold issue, I see discoloration underneath the kitchen sink. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. Could be mold. Could not be mold. By the way, that's another thing to be careful. You say it's mold. I had a tenant just a week or so ago call me up and like, oh, there's mold in the kitchen. I go, I have no idea what was growing in her kitchen. It wasn't mold. It was almost like some sort of crystals or something like that. I think she had spilt some sort of a cleaner product or something like that, and it was literally crystallizing, little crystals growing out of the thing. So, oh, that's mold. I'm like, well, I don't know what it is, and it might not be healthy, but it's not mold. Okay. So, at any rate, did I answer your question? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. What, anything else?
And Lance, on
Yes.
those Avets, I have one listing agent do his Avet,
Yep.
and every room was good.
Well, you gotta be careful with that. I mean, if everything is good,
You know?
then you're okay with that. But you know, I would suggest that you need to be really, really careful with that. I'm gonna pull up the Avet here real fast, and then I promise we'll get out of here.
Well, from our housing inspection days, I think I'd go a little more detailed than that.
Well, if it's good, I'd like to see some different descriptions. I would like to see, like for example, when we do our, actually it's 3 pages. I don't know why.
Or
I
they
said
say
it was 4 pages.
it's okay.
Right, but I'd like to see, like on our tenant ones, we will do, like say for example, living room. We want to talk about carpet.
Mhm.
Okay, the living room, dining room, and other rooms, the carpet's new. Okay, then I'll put a line on here.
Mhm.
Carpet new throughout. Okay.
Okay.
Paint fresh throughout, or
Mhm.
paint new throughout,
Mhm.
okay? Because I don't want to have to write it 15 times, so sometimes I get lazy. Probably an attorney might say, oh, wait a minute, you have to go through mine every single time. But where you got to be careful is, if you're just doing good, and you end up in court, I'm telling you, a judge is going to take a look at that,
That's good.
and they're going to look at some photographs, and if those photographs show some sort of wear and tear, which is what I would rather see. What I would rather see, rather than saying good, average, or poor, property appears to show normal wear and tear, property appears to show excessive wear and tear, property appears to show minimal wear and tear.
Mhm.
Now, there's a problem with that as well, because that's very subjective. What you think is normal wear and tear to me might be excessive.
Yeah.
But at least I can defend that. I can sit back and say, based upon my 25 years, this appears to be normal wear and tear. So you don't have to go through it. There's a punch stain in the corner and the carpet is torn about 3 feet from the south window. You don't have to go through and list everything. That's not what's expected here. Now, having said that, if you do that, is that okay?
Mhm.
That's okay. You know, you're probably going to have some people say, geez, what are you trying to do, scare the heck out of your client? Sure. I'm trying to scare the heck out. I just want to make sure that they don't come after me later. Disclose. So. Okay, guys. Oh, one more.
Have you ever had a situation where you're, for example, filling out the TDS on page 1, talking about the mold?
Yep.
And he says no, but you're looking at like, hey, what
Absolutely.
I see, I'm looking at it right there. And he's like, no, absolutely not. And
Happens
say,
all the
yes,
time.
no, yes, no.
Happens
What's your personal?
happens all the time, and it's not just in relation to mold. It has to do with anything on the transfer disclosure statement. It has to do with anything. Okay. If you have a client who is obviously, I'll give you again another. I love real life examples. They always seem to be more interesting. I just sold a house out in La Quinta. Okay, we did the walkthrough with the seller. Okay, we were having a problem getting the heater to heat the jacuzzi. Okay, and it's a pretty nice house. The seller is there. I'm representing the buyer. My client is there. And again, by the way, when I'm doing walkthroughs and the other party is there and their agent is there, I have no problem asking them questions. Technically, we don't talk to the other clients.
Yeah.
But if you're the listing agent and you're the seller and I'm there with my client and hey, what's going on with the heater for the pool or for the jacuzzi? Okay. And again, if you want to stop me as the buyer, hey, Lance, don't be talking to my client. My experience has been most sellers will volunteer information, and most listing agents will listen for the answer. They don't stop you mid-sentence. But anyway, I asked the seller The heater doesn't seem to be working for the jacuzzi. This is a nice house, nice pool, nice spa. There's nothing about it that looks dilapidated. The seller's response to me was, oh, well, we've never used it. Like, you've been here for quite a while. Well, the pool's beautiful. You've never used the jacuzzi? Oh, we use the jacuzzi all the time, but we've never used the heater. And I'm like, and then he proceeds to tell me, oh yeah, we're down in the desert out here, and it's always, it's always warm, and I'm thinking, what are you talking about? As someone who loves a good jacuzzi, there's no way in the world you're going to get me in a jacuzzi unless it's at least 101 degrees. I don't want to go in a jacuzzi that's 75 degrees or 80 degrees or even 95 degrees. That doesn't do it for me. So I'm looking at this seller, and I'm not saying this, but I'm thinking, you are a lying dog. And by the way, what else are you going to lie to us about as we do this inspection? So putting that in context, now I'm the listing agent. That scares me. Now again, this is at the time of a walkthrough. If I'm the listing agent and my seller is going to flat out lie, specifically to the buyer or the buyer's agent, that really, really concerns me. So, to answer your question, I'm now filling out a transfer disclosure statement. And it's not a bad idea to do these with your client. Do them with your seller, okay? Now, if you haven't completely done your own inspection at the same time, as you just took the listing and you're not as familiar with it, and it's dark out, everything's fine. The next day, you come out and say, hey, I need to do my own inspection, or the next day or a couple days later, you come out and you do it, and now you're like, whoa. You said everything's fine, this place is a mess. You got to confront them right up, straight up. To use your example, let's suppose you've already seen it. You've gone out there, the pool equipment is in tatters. You're now filling out the transfer disclosure statement. How's the pool equipment? Pool equipment is fine. Wait a minute. I just looked at it. You even told me. Yeah, I know, but I'm just it'll be fine. No. We disclose everything. And if you have a client that doesn't want to disclose, first of all, you probably don't want to do business with them. Second of all, it's really easy. Okay, fine. You're going to expose yourself, but I'm just telling you, as your agent, I have a duty to disclose. Whether you put it down or not, I'm going to put it down. Okay? Well, I don't want you to do that. And this goes for everything. We talked about this when we did the TDS. This goes for, remember the neighborhood nuisance and noise problem? I think that's question 10 on page 2. I've had sellers, I'm moving because the neighborhood stinks. There's drug dealers over there, there's a halfway house over there, this guy over here is a nice guy, but he just parties too much. Okay? Well, now we get to the transfer disclosure statement. Are you, the seller, to the best of your knowledge, aware of any neighborhood nuisance or noise problems? No. What? You just told me. Yeah, I know, but I can't tell a buyer that. You better. And frankly, given the fact that you just told me, I'm putting it down. And you've got to put it down. So it doesn't matter whether it's the neighborhood problem, the mold under the kitchen sink, the guy who's been pouring mortar oil in his backyard for 25 years, you have knowledge of it, you have to disclose it. And bottom line is, this is a good rule to follow in your entire real estate career. We're in this business for a career. We are not in this business to close one transaction. And unfortunately, so many of the realtors in the business, they get so focused on the single transaction. I've got to get this deal closed because I have bills to pay, or the seller's going to kill me, or whatever, or it's going to expire. If I don't get this deal closed, the world will come to an end. I assure you, the world will not come to an end if you don't close that deal. But what do people do when they put themselves in that pressure? Not 9 times out of 10, it's normally financial. Agents, sellers, buyers as well, do things that they otherwise should not be doing because I've got to close by Friday. Why do you have to? Well, because if I don't close by Friday, this is going to happen. Yeah, but you understand that you have a problem, and there's no way you can get this problem solved properly before Friday. That's okay. We're going to find a way. That's the mentality is, I've got to get my one deal closed. As quickly as you can get away from closing the single deal and think I want to be here for the next 25 years, and I wanna close 1,000 deals, or 500 deals, or whatever your goal is, or 20 deals. Well, you're not gonna get to deal 20 if you're cutting corners on deal 1, okay? And you may get to deal 20, but you're never gonna have any referral clients, you're not gonna sleep well at night. You know, you're gonna be constantly looking over your shoulder for the clients that are upset with you because you, is this normal in our business? This is normal. This is why we're doing so much of this training, because the norm in our business, unfortunately, is let's cut the corners and let's get this deal closed, because I gotta get it closed by Friday, for whatever reasons. I need to get paid, my seller's grinding on me, you know, the buyer's unreasonable. Okay, well, fine, but that doesn't alleviate your duty to disclose. Okay, so you always got to disclose, and it's always that last minute thing, that last minute deal. Everything is done, all the problems are solved. You are going to close escrow tomorrow morning, you go by the property tonight to take down your sign and do whatever, and you see that the front window is broken. I just won't tell anybody. We'll just let it close. Let the buyer come in, we'll just say it must have happened after close of escrow, I don't know anything about it. That's not how we do it. But if I do it, they're going to ask me to pay for it. Well, they might. It's a material fact that has to be disclosed. And if you don't disclose it, you are breaching your fiduciary duty to your client, and you're jeopardizing your standing in the business, and you're standing your real estate license. So, okay, guys. All right. Good job. Go out there and find some mold.